Zach LaVine heckled by a fan about getting traded to the Lakers. What is going on with the Bulls, the trade market, and how Zach LaVine responded to this fan? I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe right here to the channel. We've got about 20% of the viewers right now are subscribed. We'd like to get that number up. So if you're in the 80 percentile that's not subscribed, hit that subscribe button for us. We don't think, we're biased, but we don't think you're going to regret it. Joining me is Donnie Freeman. Donnie, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Trev, and everybody else that's watching the video. We're recording it today, but you guys will probably see it tomorrow. So belated,
Yep.
but still, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Now, here's what happened. This was recorded, was put out there on TikTok. Zach LaVine and his interaction with a fan when the Bulls were taking on the Wizards. Check it out.
Zach, where are you getting traded? What city they sending it to? Lakers?
So if you didn't catch it, Zach said, I signed here. I love Chicago. Something to that effect. I signed here. I love it here. So, Don, first and foremost, what do you think about fans yelling over the top of everybody else, just saying something that they're hoping will get a reaction out of a player? What do we think about that concept to begin? Because that's obviously what the goal was just to get Zach LaVine to respond to something that was being said.
Yeah, well, everyone wants to feel heard and feel seen. So if that's part of why they do that. So I don't really have any opinions on it altogether. It's more funny when we get these little sideline videos where the player actually listens and responds, because we have some of those with a lot of players. Like I saw one earlier or this week about LeBron too. It was pretty funny, but yeah, it's just they always want to get seen and heard. So I don't have any problem with it. But just the fact that he said, I basically want to stay in Chicago, I'm like, I'm not so sure about that. If that's maybe he does. I don't know.
Well, he said, I love it here, but what else is he supposed to say? Man,
Right,
hey,
right.
yeah, get me out of here. Get me out of here. Because he knows that's going to go everywhere if he says that. But I think it doesn't change. Even if Zach is saying, and by the way, I thought he handled this very well and said, I love it. I love it here. I
That media
signed
training.
here. Yes, exactly. And Zach is 29 now. He's been doing this for a long time. He handled that like a true pro. But it doesn't change the fact that he is one of the most likely trade candidates out there on the market right now. The Bulls certainly are going to try to move on from him. And Donnie, I don't know if you've been taking a look at the Eastern Conference standings. The Bulls we talk about teams that need to get into the tank race, teams that need to, jettison some talent. The Bulls need to move off of some guys. They're going to work to move Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic. Those are the two main pieces. Other guys they may move as well, but they are right where they do not want to be. Sitting in 10th, barely hanging in. This is just kind of what the Bulls have been for years now, sitting in 10th and in the play-in in the NBA. This is no man's land, essentially. If you are the Chicago Bulls, they need to truly bottom this thing out. And that's going to mean getting rid of Zach LaVine, getting rid of Nikola Vucevic, and looking forward to a brighter future.
Yeah, I haven't looked at this in a few days. And on a side note, oh my God, the Sixers, they just can't get it together. 2-game streak. Because I expected, I did a video the other day where I talked about this. And one of the things I said was I expect the Bulls and the Nets to fall out of the playoff picture. They're going to do something to kind of just get rid of some of these guys because they're winning a bit too much. And in the East, the playoff picture is so expansive because guys are 8-12 and they're barely the 10 seed. But yeah, so I expect these teams to fall out, but I do also expect some other teams to go up. And on the topic of the Sixers, I don't know what's going on there. I thought they would have probably tried to win a couple games here. Anyway, for the Bulls, yeah, they've got some guys on the team like LaVine, Vucevic that they're going to try to get rid of. And with LaVine, I think he's an interesting one because he is somebody I think that while I think the contract is the biggest concern with him. I don't think it's health or anything else. I think it's the contract. But I do think that while the contract's bad, he is somebody that I think that if you put him in a contending situation, he can impact winning, and he would be good for that team. That may be saying a lot because he's never truly been in that position. So I guess it remains to be seen. But I think with his skill set, he could be somebody that could be useful. But, in terms of just basically what is he supposed to say? He's not really, there's nothing he really can say. Somebody like me though, and it would have pissed people off. Like if I was LaVine, right? I would have been like, oh, they're like, you going to the Lakers? I would have been like, hell yeah, they already got me a flight to LA already, this and that. This is the deal.
That would have spawned just a million instant reactions of Donnie Freeman confirms Lakers trade and would have started the team's PR department. Whatever team you were hypothetically playing for would have been so pissed off at you.
I would have went to Twitter and been like, guys, I was just joking. I thought I was kidding. I was using sarcasm. Like, no. But yeah, he's in a weird spot. The Bulls, they're going to definitely need to get rid of him at some point. But I mean, there's also always the possibility that they just don't. Maybe they try to do some weird stuff and just shut him down or something like that at some point if they're not able to get off him.
Well, here's the real tricky part here for the Chicago Bulls. You look at their first round draft pick, it is protected 1 through 10. 1 through 10 protection. So they lose if they are too good, or as of right now, I mean, here is if the draft happened right now and everything stayed chalk. This is what it would look like. The Bulls have the 9th pick. So if 2 teams behind them jump them, they lose their pick this year. That would be devastating in this year's draft to lose a top 10 pick. So that's part of why the Bulls, maybe more than some of these other teams that are in tank mode, are even more incentivized to drop down further and try to guarantee that they actually get the keep their top 10 protected pick. So it's a very challenging spot to be in if you're the Chicago Bulls. But you're right, Donnie, that Zach LaVine production-wise has been more than fine. You look at what he's done so far this season, and I really like Zach LaVine's efficiency so far. I mean, 51% from the field right now. That's a career best for Zach LaVine. He's hitting 7.8 shots out of 15.4 attempts. You look at the 3-point shooting, pretty good volume, 7 attempts from 3 while shooting. Good Lord, 43%. See, that's where I think some of this isn't quite sustainable. Like, he's a good 3-point shooter, but he's never been 43% good. So
he had one season where he went 42 at 8.2
well, that's true.
Though.
That's
8
true.
attempts. Like, that's kind of crazy.
So, I mean, is this and he did shoot, I guess you're right. He did shoot 51% from the field. Is this just a heater season like we saw back in the 2020, 2021 season? Maybe. 4.3 assists, 4.7 boards, 22 points we round up per game. He's producing just fine out there on the floor. The injury concerns, I also kind of feel like the injury concerns are overstated. When you look at what he's done, yes, last season he dealt with a serious injury, only played in 25 games. That's not good. But look at the season before that, 77, 67, season before that. And we were dealing with COVID stuff that season. The season before that, that was when we had the COVID shutdown and everything. You've got 58 games, 60 games. So you've got some COVID shortened seasons there, and he's still playing in a pretty decent chunk. It's not like he's missing half the season. Like his games played ledger looks nothing like, say, Zion Williamson or someone like that. He is not in that category in terms of being injury prone. So maybe the injury concerns are a bit overstated at this point, but you're right. I think it ultimately comes down to the contract. And here, I guess here's the big question, Donnie. Is Zach LaVine capable of being the second best player on a winning team?
On a winning team with title aspirations? No.
Yes.
But like a team that, like, say, for example, the Lakers, because they were brought up in this. Say they landed LaVine and LeBron retires after this season, theoretically, and they got LaVine and AD. Could that team, with some good pieces around them, be a good team and make it in the playoffs? Sure. Like, I think that's possible. But I don't think that team's going anywhere unless they got another star player alongside. I think LaVine at best on a team that has true aspirations, he's probably your third guy, which is a tough ask to be saying I'm giving my third guy $45 million with a $49 million player option the next year. That's where this contract is crazy.
That's it. That's the problem. In today's CBA, it's really hard to pay that kind of money to a guy who is your third best player on a team that has title aspirations. So that makes it tough, like, to go trade for him. Not only is that just a lot of money you have to stack up salary wise to go get a player like Zach LaVine, in addition to the teams that might be interested that are in contention, they have trade restrictions under the new CBA, including some teams are not able to aggregate salaries in a trade. That would make it very difficult to go trade for Zach. or other teams, they're in situations where they have to send out more money than they take back. So now you're talking about, if you're going to try to trade for him this year, you have to stack up more than $43 million in a trade. That's tough. Now he's played well. I don't know if he's played well enough to where teams are going to overlook the contract and be willing to give the Bulls any kind of positive asset as opposed to just, salaries going out. That could be a challenge too if the Bulls are hoping to actually get something in return for LaVine. But I still think when push comes to shove, Chicago is going to want to keep their pick, and they're going to move Zach. They're going to move Vucevic, who's played well this season, but they're getting up there in years. They're clearly not part of the future. I think the Bulls find a way. Where does Zach land? Where do you think assuming they do finally pull the trigger on a trade, they find a team to move him to, where does he go?
That's a really tough question, given the fact that you've got to actually look at the CBA and how all that stuff works out.
Sure.
I don't know what teams are true options for him at this point. Maybe there's something where he can land in New Orleans if they decided to get rid of Zion. Maybe they could do something like that.
Okay.
That's one thing that kind of comes to mind off the top of my head. Probably not the best destination. Maybe the Bucks, if they could put together the matching salary, I think that could be
that's the problem. They can't. The Bucks can't aggregate salaries, so that's the challenge.
They can't aggregate. That's why I said you really got to think about it. You got
right. It's tough. It's these new rules, which is why I always recommend Spot Track. If you guys are going to do any kind of trade machine stuff, a lot of the other trade machines don't have the new rules factored in, so they're going to tell you trades work that absolutely do not. Spot Track has everything dialed in. Use Spot Track when you're trying to come up with trades because they will tell you whether or not a trade works under the new CBA rules. But what about yes? I mean, let me ask you that. Would you? And I know people, anytime we mention Lakers, people complain that is not a Lakers channel and all that. We really don't bring them up very often because I do all of my Lakers talk over at Lakers Nation. But
I just want to say I challenge anybody that thinks that to look at our videos and tell us the last time there was an actual Laker video. There was one video with LeBron on it because that was a Heat thing. But when's the last time there was an actual Laker video? You'd be surprised.
It's been quite a while. But that said, if you were the Lakers, would you do D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, Gabe Vincent? You're just stacking up salaries. There's an expiring salary in there to the Bulls for Zach LaVine.
It's just so much you're sending out in terms of a depth on a team that's not all that deep.
Yeah.
But I think if you put him next to LeBron, AD, you get to keep AR and DK. I mean, I think you could be cooking with that. I mean, you're really leaning into the offense,
sure.
But I think that could be awesome. I think that could be awesome. And he also would be somebody that can score, handle the ball, create for you. That's one of my main concerns with getting rid of D'Lo is that I don't want to just not have the third ball handler because what if one of LeBron or AR isn't there? Then all of a sudden you have nobody to dribble the ball. So LaVine, I think, could do that for you, and he can give you the scoring that you need. And he could also be an off-ball guy. I'd have to look at his off-ball efficiency, but regardless, being able to shoot the way he does, I'm sure he could get that done. So that would just be another threat for that team, and I think that they'd lean into the offense and they'd be good. I'd like to see him with JJ, man. I think he could really cook with LaVine.
I'm more open to it now than I would have been over the summer now that we've seen Zach back on the floor. But here's my thought. Take a look at this. I'm not saying trade him to the Nets. I don't think the Nets want him. I don't think that it doesn't fit what the Nets are trying to do. But look at that big expiring contract for Ben Simmons. $40 million, almost equal to Zach LaVine's contract. I think there's a 3-team scenario here where the Bulls wind up getting Ben Simmons and another team picks up Zach LaVine, and the Nets can get some type of asset for that expiring contract of Ben Simmons, some type of 3-team trade where the Bulls are able to clear their books of Zach LaVine. To me, I think that's the ideal situation. You're not going to get back a ton of positive value assets, but if you can clear the money off your books, I think that would make a lot of sense for the Chicago Bulls. If you can get a second or something like that, great. I'm sure Bulls fans will say, give me a first, but I don't know if you can get there for Zach LaVine. But if you could use Ben Simmons' contract in a 3-team trade, of course, the Nets would have to be incentivized with something, especially if they're taking back any type of long-term salary. But that could be a way to get Chicago something, a way to get Brooklyn something for a guy who, I mean, has not been representative of a strong move for the Brooklyn Nets. But if they can get something out of him too, maybe you're killing two birds with one stone here and stringing together a couple of guys who, at least salary-wise, would fit.
Yeah, so the Bulls need to really, like, ideally get rid of like half that roster. They've got guys
Sure.
on there that they could potentially get something for, like Lonzo or Javon Carter or Vucevic, whatever it is. They need to get rid of all those guys. And the Nets are in a similar position where they need to get rid of some of these guys too. But do you think, because over the summer, you mentioned that, like, how you're more open to it. One of the things was like LaVine, since we hadn't seen him out there, it was like, if you want us to take him, no, we'll do it, but you've got to be giving us something. We don't want to get off of picks. Like, if you give us picks back, then we consider it more. Do you think that that would be a stance a team would have with trying to take this contract, or do you think they would look at him as an actual player, his value, unlike Ben, for example, where he's just a contract? Right. I think LaVine, they're going to look at him as a real player. Do you think that the Bulls would be trying to get assets back for LaVine, or are they just trying to salary dump him?
So I think there's a middle ground here, right? Where the Bulls will want assets for him. Other teams will tell the Bulls, oh, no, you need to give us assets to take on that contract. The middle ground is it's just neutral. And I think that's probably where we're at. And look, I don't think the Bulls are going to give up assets to move Zach LaVine. I think if they were going to do that, it would have already been done. We would have already seen a deal come into place over the summer. The fact that we didn't see a deal over the summer tells you they are not willing to give up assets, at least significant assets, to move off of Zach LaVine's contract. That doesn't make, and maybe their draft pick situation changes that, but you could always, if it costs you a first to move off of Zach LaVine, couldn't you just sit Zach LaVine? I mean, maybe the NBA would have something to say about it, but the bottom line is, I don't think the Bulls are ultimately going to give up anything of value to move Zach LaVine's contract. He's playing well enough to where they shouldn't have to. But the flip side is, I also don't think the Bulls, given his contract, should expect anything significant in return for Zach LaVine either. If they can clear salary off the books, that should be the primary goal and reset the team that way. I think that's the middle ground, and that's probably where the truth of Zach LaVine's value really is.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. He's just in a weird spot with, the next couple of years as well, making so much money that it's hard to get him off of this team in the first place, to a team that would want his value in terms of like trying to be a player that can put up for a contending team, because they're in weird situations due to the cap constraints. But I do think that they'll try to find a way to move him. And when you show that they're top 10 protected, I mean, they've got to find a way to get him out of there so they can just get worse, because they don't want to lose that pick. And I do think that there's a possibility that if we get to the deadline, he's not moved. I think there is a possibility they just try to find a way to shut him down for the season, shut some of these guys down for the season, and then just kind of go from there. I'm not so sure that all these guys will retain, but I do think that LaVine, they might wind up having that situation happen for. And then in the offseason, I mean, with one less year on this, maybe you can say something more, because after that, I mean, while it's tough to say I'll pay $49 million for my third guy, at that point, that he's a $50 million, $49 million expiring deal. So, a couple of years from now, so you could maybe make something work with that.
Now, here's when you talk about moving him just to make sure you lose games, here's great evidence of that. I mean, look, obviously Taylor Horton-Tucker being at the top of this list is kind of funny, but you look at the sample size, the minutes are minuscule.
Okay.
But you look at Zach LaVine in terms of positive impact, he's the best Bull in terms of significant minutes. He's a plus 10.3 points per 100. This is via cleaning the glass, and the expected wins plus 22 wins on the season.
Crazy,
with Zach LaVine being on the floor right now. Like, on one hand, the Chicago Bulls should be plastering this, in the faces of every opposing team that has any kind of interest in Zach LaVine, and say, see, he's good. Give us something for him. But this is also a good sign for the Bulls that, hey, if you move him, you are going to take a step back. You are going to start losing games, and that will allow you to keep your draft pick, which I think is the more important thing for this franchise moving into the future. So again, Zach LaVine, we look at the minutes. of the guys who are playing significant minutes, Kobe White, Nikola Vucevic, Dosunmu, Zach LaVine ranking 4th on the Bulls in minutes right now, and it's not close in terms of differential here via cleaning the glass. Zach is making a major impact on the Bulls winning games. You get him off this roster, and I think the tank will be in full effect for Chicago. So a lot of incentive there, but Donnie, the clock is ticking. They want to keep that pick. The tank race is going to be hot and heavy this year. Wouldn't shock me if we start hearing legit Zach LaVine trade talks maybe around Christmas time. Maybe those talks pick up a little bit early this year because Chicago, the tank race is serious in the East. And yeah, they need to start dropping games sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree. But we need to actually start talking about how the Sixers need to start offloading guys and going for the tank race. They're currently projected. They're currently projected to get the number 2 pick. That is insanity. That's what we need to be talking about. It's time to blow it up at this point.
They need to make, like, if this is really it for Philly, shut down Paul George for the season, shut down Joel Embiid for the season. I mean, this is a whole nother video, but my God, their pick is top 6 protected. Top 6. If it is 7th, the Thunder get a lottery pick. It goes to the Thunder.
Man.
So the Sixers either need to keep being this level of futile, or they have to magically get everyone healthy and soar back up to the top, because it's an all or nothing type situation. Top 6 protected. Even if if they wind up with the 4th worst record in the NBA, there's still a decent chance that they're going to lose that pick. So they've got to either commit to being awful, and in which case Jared McCain probably wins Rookie of the Year because they're just going to give him the ball and sit everybody else and off you go, or they need to figure things out in a hurry. What a nightmare of a season it's been for the 76ers. I know we've talked a lot about them, and like I said, we're probably venturing into the territory of another video here, but good Lord, Philly. What a mess.
I couldn't let this video end because they were projected on that to get the 2nd overall pick right now. That's disgusting.
Unbelievable.
So I had to bring that full circle. But yeah, to the Bulls, they've got a lot of guys they need to offload. Obviously, nobody more than LaVine. So there's going to be opportunities. Let's see if they pull the trigger on them.
Yep. And let's see if Zach LaVine gets heckled in any more cities. Thanks again, everybody. Make sure you do subscribe and check out our latest video on Anthony Edwards and what I thought was a pretty childish tantrum thrown at his teammates and Wolves fans. Go check that one out right now.